Is it still worth it to try and build something thoughtful in a system that rewards speed and scale? What's up, guys? My name's Akea, artist, researcher, and curator of Buttermilk Goods. In the physical realm, we are a curated vintage shop that I own in Metro Detroit. In this digital space, I am meeting you at the intersection of fashion, history, culture, money, and the realities of owning and operating a business. If any of that sounds interesting, I think you're in the right place. If you are stopping by for the first time, it is good to see you, and if you're returning, it is good to have you back. I hope you are doing well. If you are looking for ways to support the channel, liking or sharing the video is extremely helpful. If you want to comment and share your thoughts, I'd love to hear what you have to say. And if you'd love to subscribe and stay longer and stay updated with what I'm doing, all of these are easy and free ways to support the work that I'm doing here on the channel. Without anything else to ramble about, I think we should get into the video because, as we all know, there's always more to the story than the outfit. So I titled my first video on my channel, "So I Opened a Store in This Economy," because I think the real question underneath of that is, was this a mistake? I want to answer clearly and straightforward that no, this wasn't a mistake, but it hasn't been easy. And I think if you're clicking on this video hoping for a success story or maybe even expecting a cautionary tale of failure, I'll be honest that the truth lies somewhere in between. Okay, so I'm talking a lot about this concept of opening a business and whether or not this was a mistake, but I do want to clarify that in terms of talking about a mistake, I don't mean that it's not been wildly profitable. Or honestly, that I'd recommend that everyone do this because I definitely would not recommend this to everyone. But I think I'm meaning a mistake more in the sense of what I value and what I was actually hoping to achieve. I don't necessarily think that I have failed in those ways. So when I think about that, I think about autonomy, I think about depth, and I think about long-term sustainability. And those are the things that I was really focused on investing in when I decided to open a brick and mortar. Specifically now, which from the outside looking in feels and sounds crazy, but I do think that that distinction matters. I don't want to skate over the big elephant in the room, and the reality is that this economy is incredibly tough right now. I don't think it's tough for everyone, but for a lot of people, it is very tight. Money is tight. A lot of discretionary spending is down. I have definitely witnessed that during the holiday season. Operating costs are high for a lot of people. I mean, rent, inventory, labor, especially in cities like Detroit, where we aren't necessarily a capital of commerce in the sense of retail and fashion. And that's not to minimize the history and the influence that Detroit has contributed to fashion, history, culture, music, all of that. But the reality is that it's still a very hard place to make it. To put it plainly, I did not open this store thinking that people would be lined up to just show up and throw their money at me. I opened it knowing that every dollar really matters and people are spending much more intentionally, much more carefully, and much more mindfully these days, which in terms of owning and operating a business, especially a new one, is something that I am very privy to, and I genuinely do take it seriously when people choose to patron and support my business. Oh my god. I don't know if you can hear these birds, but I feel like they don't want me to be great. They're like right outside the window. So the reality of Detroit is that it really is a relationship-driven market. People genuinely shop locally here when they trust you. I don't feel like there's as much shopping or buying things just because something is cheap or trending. And in all honesty, I feel like it takes a good 2 to 3 years for trends to actually hit here. I'm not sure why, but I definitely feel like the community around shopping and patronage is very, very centered on relationships. And so that has been much more of a priority. And it's also a reason why being very, very present in the business has been very important, and I think is what has contributed to helping the business grow and sustain itself. And I mean, we're only 5 months into having the brick and mortar, so genuinely, without a doubt, I can 100% sit here and say that the word of mouth has been absolutely incredible, and the ways that people have been showing up and sharing with their community, sharing with their networks, bringing people back, it has genuinely been what has allowed us to keep the lights on and pay the bills and continue to stock inventory. And so I do want to emphasize that our location and our decision to open a shop in Metro Detroit was definitely not with some fantastical sort of over exaggeration of what we thought we would be able to achieve. It's definitely a slower build, but I think at the core of it, it is much more relationship centered than a lot of other places that I have personally lived. And that is something that I have been sitting with a lot as I think about moving forward with the business. So let's talk really quickly about the money. I think that this is always something that people glaze over. I am sort of going to do that as well in this video, but I will be making another video specifically about the money. We are in our last week of 2025, and so in the new year, I will be making a video that is sharing the numbers for our first 5 months in business. So stay tuned. I will be very transparent about what it costs to get things started, how much we have made, and how much inventory has cost. And so just stay tuned for that. But I will say that even though I'm not going to share the exact numbers yet, I will say that the store is covering itself and the margins are tighter than people would assume, but we have been able to pay the rent and we are actually very close to getting out of the red per se and getting into a space where we are much closer to making a profit. I would estimate somewhere around, maybe it depends on how much inventory I end up stocking for the upcoming season, but I would say around the 8 or 9 month mark, we will be in an area where we are starting to get out of the red and have recouped what we put into the business. And so I will say that for a new shop that at this moment in time is only 5 months old and we are only open limited hours at the moment, we have, aside from the holiday season where we added 12 to 4 on Sundays, we have only been open Thursday through Saturday from 12 to 6. So that is not an expansive amount of time to make money. That is 18 hours a week, and that is what we have been doing all of this on. So I will share more about that later, but I will just say some months do better than others, and in all honesty, the difference primarily comes down to inventory flow, timing, and how much labor I'm putting into it. So we will get into that in another video. I will also say that opening a vintage shop is most likely one of the lower barriers to entry, which is why I think a lot of people are opening vintage shops, because for the most part, if you are just thrifting or you are going through your family's closets or the closets of your grandparents or family friends, I mean, the cost of inventory is actually rather low in comparison to purchasing new inventory. Now, we have both curated vintage and curated new items, so we have had an increased cost of inventory because I am purchasing from retailers. We are purchasing at wholesale prices, but obviously, if we were not purchasing some of these newer items, yeah, it would be a very different situation money-wise, but stay tuned for that video. I will be breaking all of that down. There's also a very real divide between the online space and the brick and mortar space, especially also when it comes to vintage, which, let's just be honest, there is an oversaturation of vintage retailers right now, especially with online vintage where the shopping is much more fast, it's much more visual, and it's a lot more price compressed, whereas the brick and mortar, it definitely requires a lot more education, a lot more context, and a lot more patience. There's a lot more of an expectation that you really know what you talk about, and I think that in a way it's also kept me on my P's and Q's as a business owner, as a curator, and as someone that really wants to be able to be proud of what I'm carrying in my shop. And if you did not check out my video, my first video, I'm actually giving you a little bit of a tour of the space and sort of the background story of how I got started. So please go check out that video. There will be a lot more of that context in that previous video that I won't be including in here, but I will link it down below. So there are a lot of ways that I could have made this experience easier or faster. It is now December of 2025 at the time of me recording this video, and we signed the lease for the location in March, and it was about mid-July that we opened our doors. So during that time, it was a lot of acquiring inventory, which was honestly the easiest part, figuring out the layout, doing the build out of the shop, trying to start and build up some sort of strategy for social media, which I was very adamant about not wanting to have a marketing budget. So far we have really just been going off of word of mouth and trying to grow an online presence in 2025, fighting those invisible algorithm gods. I mean, it has been humbling, very much so, but it has also been a big lesson in patience. I can also say that really touting ourselves as a curatorial project has also allowed people to take our curations much more seriously. There also comes this weird element of some people feeling like it's not accessible for them, and that has also been something to work through as well, is making sure that the work and energy and labor of sourcing and curating and mending and all of the things that goes into really creating an archive of pieces is valued by customers, but is also not something that is exclusionary to customers. And that has been a really interesting line to tout, especially in an area that is historically and culturally very working class, very blue collar, and doesn't always allow, I mean, just the realities of life here don't always allow for those two things to coincide harmoniously. So the real risk here isn't just money. I think that that is always the focus, is thinking about things fiscally. How much is it going to cost? But when you have been self-employed, or even if you're just journeying into that world, you understand that money is just one aspect of things, and often a lot of the cost really comes down to your time. So it's time, it's energy, it's focus, and it's also thinking about that opportunity cost of not putting those things elsewhere. So when you are putting your time, energy, focus, and money into one thing, there's all of these other things that are not receiving the time, energy, money, and focus. And so when you think about that, it's very important to be aware of what you are trading. I will say now that I am very aware of what I'm trading. I chose to do this intentionally. I did not jump into this where I had been working a 9 to 5 for years and I just decided, hey, I'm going to open a vintage shop. I am a full-time artist and have been able to make a living from the sale of my work for years now. It has been I've been working for myself since I graduated college. So it has been years of me being in the mindset of being self-employed and being a small business owner. And I didn't have a brick and mortar, but my studio is its own business. And basically what I'm saying is the sacrifices and the trades are things that I was already doing. So, luckily, that has been built up to a point where it was able to support beginning this other business and this other trade. And I am very lucky and very fortunate that I am able to still be in a position where this other business of mine is able to support this new venture, which does give me the breathing room to focus on the things that I've mentioned before, like intentionality, autonomy, and really focusing on networking and sustainability and longevity. So I would not categorize this as a mistake primarily because the goal wasn't necessarily profit. The goal was really to build a space where clothing can be treated as labor and history and material culture and not just disposable trending content. And that kind of work is much slower. It asks much more of people, not just myself, but of the people who choose to support it and to help sustain it and help it grow. And it doesn't always reward you immediately. And I think when you go into something understanding that, I think what you define as a mistake is very different. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm not interested in it turning a profit. Obviously, it's still a business, and so it does need to be able to sustain itself. But I do want to be very clear that defining success for me is going to be very specific to me, and defining success for you is very different for you. I think for me right now, success doesn't necessarily look like this rapid growth or expansion. I think about it very often, like, what does that look like for me? And at this point in time, it looks like a store that is able to sustain itself, evolve slowly and intentionally, and really support my broader work and especially my research within fashion and material history and culture without burning me out. And if that definition changes, I will say so. And I'll be very honest about that. But at this moment in time, um, that is what success is looking like for me at the moment. So I think when I get down to it, when I asked, was this a mistake? What I was really asking is it still worth it to try and build something thoughtful in a system that rewards speed and scale? For me, right now, the answer is yes. But it's a very, very, very exhausting and scary question to answer in a culture and society that values completely unrealistic and unsustainable levels of growth and expansion and consumption. And so I think that this is very much so a thoughtful experiment and a curiosity and a practice in questioning just as much as it is a business venture. I'm still very early on in the process, but I am really looking forward to sharing with you and just being honest about what this experience is like for me. So, if you are interested in the realities of building a small business, in terms of fashion, money, and risk, and not just the aesthetic aspects of those things, but, the reality of what it actually looks and feels like, I will keep sharing what it looks like for me in this little corner. Hopefully, if nothing else, you take away that you are really able to chase any questions you have the energy, the capacity, and the desire to answer. So that is all for the video today. I'm Akea, this is Buttermilk Goods, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.